Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. If you are listening to this for the first time, thank you for being here. We are thankful that people can come and have a place to listen to how to process, how to carry, how to grow, how to heal from trauma. With me is Brooke. Walk forward with. We're still doing this. Well, you know, everybody who's listening, I feel like when you say walk forward with, it just will really resonate. But sometimes if I'm just starting, I'm like, I don't even want to think about walking forward.
That's fair. Yeah, so, no, with walking period. I mean, hello,
yeah.
We're in bed.
Yeah. Wherever you are, maybe we find you in one of those transition places where you can eventually walk forward and carry that with you in a way that is thrivable, if you will. And I know it seems impossible at the beginning. It seems so impossible at the beginning.
It does.
With me is Brooke Scherer.
Hey guys.
Again, if this is your first episode, we highly recommend you go back to at least episode 1 or one of the first launch episodes that we had as of last week. If you're listening to this and you have already caught up, well then thank you for coming back. We really appreciate the continued listening and the support. And so, Brooke, if you want to do like that, we always do like a 30-second, because some people won't. Yeah, some people won't go back to listen to it. So if you want to do like that 30-second clip, we might as well just record you doing it once and just like insert it here.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I need to have one specific Cliff Notes version that we can just boom.
Go for it. Yes.
Go for it. Yeah. So hi, everyone. I am Brooke Scherer, and I'm sitting here today because on September 15th of 2016, our 9-year-old son was killed by a distracted driver. The trauma that we have incurred in that journey since has been immense and painful and life-threatening, honestly. But the work that our family has done to try to find another side to all of this has led me here today as an advocate for people who are going through trauma, going through grief, going through hardship, mental health issues, to let you know that we are here and that we hear you and that you are not alone and that there are resources out there. I'm really actually excited to start bringing people in too to talk about their own stories and share the resources that have helped them along their own journees. It is super exciting. We're having one this week, but that's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's exciting. And at the time of this recording, for context, we're recording this the day after Mother's Day, which kind of brought up the thought of today's topic. And so the general topic that we're covering today is those should have been moments. Mm-hmm. When you go through something traumatic, specifically with loss, but really it can happen with anything traumatic, where your life takes a completely different trajectory than what you thought should have happened. So that leads you to your should have been moments. And so for a general outline, as we start discussing this, think of these as moments as, for example, yesterday was Mother's Day. And so that kind of reminds you of, oh man, it should have been another day celebrating myself as a mother. Now you did because you have other kids, right? But there was like this, it just brings back that memory. Logan should have been graduating by now. You should have been
this
touring.
Yep,
you should have been touring colleges or something like that. Who knows?
I mean, he should have been driving already. And
yeah, those should have been moments where the trauma, and again, we say you carry it with you. You can't just like leave it behind. That's not how it works. And so it kind of sneaks up on you. And most days with those should have been moments, you think, it's fine. I mean, it sucks to think about, and it's just an aspect of this life of now living with this trauma. But then there's sometimes where it just kicks you in the middle of the
well, and that's the thing too. This is my 9th Mother's Day without my son, and while it was considerably different for the majority of the day, all it took was one thought. And I think it was a culmination of things, because I get to see other people celebrating their children, and, they have their families. And honestly, that's why I've stayed off of social media for so long, because I couldn't see those things because it reminded me of what I was missing. But, I was on on social media yesterday, and I had gotten up and I had my plans. I was going to get out and spend the day in the yard. It was a beautiful day. and spend it with my kids. And we got the soccer goal out for the girls. And, you know, we went out, there was some basketball that was played and we grilled and everything. But there was just one moment that something, just a memory triggered in my head. And um, it did not send me into any sort of abyss or black hole, or I didn't spend the day in bed or anything, which is something that I would have done before. There have been many should have been moments where, you know, I couldn't even get out of bed. So yesterday for me was a win because it's a testament of the things that I have done for myself, that I've learned, the tools that I've gained that allow me to face the day, you know, not have like all of this anxiety build up before the day. Because I do think in my mind, I build it up so much that the anxiety is worse before the day. And then when the day gets here, it's actually easier than that buildup. But I didn't have that. I didn't have that this year. I, you know, went into Mother's Day I had this very clear plan and I was excited about what, you know, I wanted to do. Mallory wanted to take me to brunch or take me to dinner. And she was actually upset with me because I was like, I don't need to go out. You know, I want to sit out on the back porch. I want to watch you guys play soccer. I want to get out in my garden and get out in my landscape. You know, I want to play some basketball. I want to grill and have a couple of beers. And for me, that's all, you know, that I needed. And for the most part, that's what we did. But by the end of the night, I was ready. You know, Jordan and we're currently rewatching Parks and Rec, and I kind of had to force a couple of episodes in. And by about 9:15, I looked at him and I was like, I'm done. I just, you know, my mood was definitely more sad after, you know, I had sat there and was like, oh, right. Well, here I am trying to distract myself from the fact that he's not here, that Logan's not here, but then it doesn't ever go away. But it didn't stop me. Yesterday for sure didn't stop me from him not being here, didn't stop me from living the life that I have today, for being in the present, for, you know, still enjoying it with my people.
Well, and you know, so let's dig into this, because there's people out there who may have had loss this last year, who are not able to just like not go back to bed. And so let's start with some thoughts of what would you recommend to someone listening, or someone who might be going through this right now, that's like, hey, I just had this loss. Maybe I lost my mom this last year, 2024, and this is the first Mother's Day without my mom. Like,
so first and foremost, it is okay to give yourself grace and treat the day that you need to. I'm sitting here talking about how I was able to get through yesterday, and it still bothered me. It still affected me, and I still had a mood change. But I'm 9 years out, and I've done certain work that has allowed me to start finding some relief on those days, and not being like this dark moment where I have to stay in bed. But, you know, there were so many years that I would just stay in bed, or I'd mope around the house, or I'd lay on the couch and just watch TV. You know, I remember one of my birthday's January 1st. So it's New Year's, and, you know, everybody's celebrating the new year and the day and everything. And I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't, because not only was it another year for me, but it was another year that I was farther away from the last time I saw Logan. And, you know, that was a very hard day. And so I would never tell anybody who is experiencing something on a specific day to, you know, buck up and, oh, you'll be fine. You'll never hear me say that. My thoughts are, give yourself grace. And I think a lot of people feel guilty for taking that time. I mean, if you need to sleep, it's okay. If you need to just be by yourself and be off the radar and not talk to anybody, it's okay. You know, I think socially we put such an emphasis on everybody just always being okay. And it's Mother's Day, so we have to do this. Or,
Right.
it's Christmas, so we have to do this and we have to honor this. And, and it's all out in the world. And again, social media will be right there going, look at what we're doing today. It's such a fantastic day. And then if we're on here going, well, it's not for me, then we start to feel guilty because all the people around us are celebrating.
Yeah, because
and
you
they're
should
having
be
a
happy.
good time. Right.
Yeah.
You should. I mean, really, at the end of the day, we're living in a Disney princess fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how our society wants to build this for us. And that is not the case at all. So my first and foremost suggestion or encouragement is A, try to remove any sort of guilt you feel for being in the space that you're in. And
Oof.
B, it is to honor and be graceful of yourself, the experience that you're going through, the experience that you've been through, and whatever self-care, healthy self-care, I'm going to throw that out there, healthy self-care you need to do to try and make it through the day, or not just the day, the second, the minute, the hour, the moment, right? Because these days happen. And I've been through many of them, and Jordan has, and Mallory has. And, it's not something you can just get over and then be like, oh, okay, well, this happened to me. Now I'm really happy because society says I have to be today.
The bad day is June 2nd or whatever, but now it's June 3rd and it should be okay now. And that also doesn't work like that either. It could take the week. It could take the month or whatever. Yeah. Can I add something to that too?
Yeah, for sure. Anytime.
I think too, and this is important, is some people might listen to this and go, oh man, but I didn't lose a son, and they try to kind of like quantify how bad versus somebody else's bad is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
I do.
It's like, no. That's also not how, first of all, everybody's, and we'll say this probably so many times over the different episodes that we do this, but everybody's been through the hardest thing that they have ever been through. Right. So just because we can all agree losing a son, and you obviously know better than anybody, it's like, that sucks, and it's traumatic, and it's grief, and it's hard, and it's heavy, and it's brutal, and it's insane, right? And then you might look at, oh, well, that person's only lost their dog or whatever, I don't know, and they might think, oh, well, he shouldn't be as sad. You hear people say that, like you it's not as bad. You hear people say that, and it's like, dude, no, because you don't know how that person is, where they were when it happened to them, what it signified to them when it happened, right? Like it. So to add to what you're saying is, don't feel bad, don't feel guilty, or try to not feel guilty about how you feel during those days where it's supposed to be a celebration or whatever. But also don't try to
compare.
Compare or quantify the grief, because it could be next year on Mother's Day and something happens specifically that reminds you of a tougher string of that trauma that, you think, well, it's been 9 years, you should kind of be over this by now. And it's like, no, are you kidding me? It's so hard to just think about it. A day for me that's important is July 13th. It's when I moved to the United States. It was the last day I saw my grandma. And, she died in October 16th is when she died, but we didn't get to go to her funeral because we were here and we couldn't travel. We were on her asylum. And so you can't leave the country when you're like going through the immigration process. And so to me, she really died the last day I saw her.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And so July 13th is always like it's always a weird day, because also the day we moved here and our life changed and stuff. But some years it's like, okay, this is the year I moved here. And some years it just devastates me. And so you might think to yourself, or people might want to think, oh, well, it's been so long, why are you still hung up on that or whatever? And so the only thing I would add to what you said is, it's okay to honor what you're going through, and it's okay that it's not okay. But also, if at all possible, don't try to think that this is like a linear, like trauma.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Right? It's not linear.
It's specifically why we chose the logo that we did. Some people might have noticed, like, it looks like sound waves, but it's also the trajectory of healing through trauma. If you want to even call it healing, it's just of carrying trauma. And it's also a heartbeat, because, you're still alive. And so it's so symbolic of just, it's okay if it's not linear. It's okay if one year hurts more than another. It's okay if you kind of regress and get attached to an idea during these should have been moments. Because again, trauma's a sneaky asshole. and
Oh yeah.
it'll just stab you.
We need to change our podcast title to "Trauma's a Sneaky Asshole."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
I'm going
sneaky
to start
asshole.
marketing that. Well, I am. I'm going to. That's
Put it
how
on
I'm
a
going to market
t-shirt.
it. Yeah. I mean, healing out loud. Let's just call it a sneaky asshole.
Yeah.
So the other thing I do want to say too is, with people feeling that guilt, I do think it's a very good point what you say about the comparison, because as humans, we compare ourselves to, especially in this day and age of social media
Oh,
and technology and everything else being out there. It is so easy for us to compare ourselves with other people. But here's also something that I want to say. If we can remove that component, right, then we can start to remove the guilt from ourselves of, you know, it's Christmas and everybody else is celebrating. Well, I didn't put up a tree this year because I just couldn't do it. And I feel bad about me. What's wrong with me that I can't do that? It's Mother's Day and everybody's, got reservations for brunch or for dinner and everybody's going out and doing stuff. Well, here I am at home and all I want to do to help myself cope, right? To use self-care in order for me to get through the day. I just want to work with my plants. I just want to go out. And I did a
yeah.
lot in my garden. I did a lot in my landscape this weekend. And that is healthy coping for me, healthy self-care. But if you get into a community where people are going to compare for you,
Oof.
oh, well, yeah, you had a miscarriage. I lost a child. Well, I never, that it blows my mind. There are people who constantly come to me, and you've said this to me about your experience with Rio. My situation doesn't compare to yours. Yours is so much, use any adjective, worse or dire or, traumatic. And you know what I tell people? No, there's no comparison. My
Yeah.
trauma is unfortunate and it is my trauma, but it doesn't mean that it outweighs or it's more important than what you're going through. So there's this dear lady named Rita at the YMCA where Mila is doing her swim lessons. And she went through a really traumatic event. Her living situation burned completely to the ground. And, my mom's actually been through that too. And I know my mom still carries, residual from all of that. But Rita and I talk every time I take Mila to swim lessons. She's the one who checks people in at the door. And of course she loves Mila, but who doesn't? Mila's just one little spark of light and energy. But she has said to me, and this dialogue has started, or her comments have started to change, but she said to me, I can never compare to you. I haven't lost a child.
Oh,
And I told her, I'm like, listen, trauma is trauma, and I tell her, I am so sorry for what you have experienced. And now she talks to me as we talk about these things. She's removed my trauma isn't as bad as yours, or my situation isn't like losing a child, and which I appreciate, because the things that she has told me about her situation, I, I, I don't understand what she's gone through, and I feel for her.
yeah.
A friend of mine who, lost her husband, and she's doing amazing things. Her name's Melanie. She's doing amazing things in this world to help people, to help support people who are going through their own shit. Another one of those that won't compare her loss, but she lost her husband, and I don't know what that's like. I can sympathize, but I can't empathize. And if someone says to me, I had a miscarriage, it's not like losing a child. I'm like, no, I'm sorry for your loss. That's hard, and
Yeah.
for people who are going through things like that, I feel personally that it's about surrounding yourself in community that doesn't rank experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't say mine is worse than yours. And, let's not talk about yours because I went through this. It's about A community is about sharing like experiences, but not having to understand where the other person is coming from, right? You can sympathize and share space with them, but you don't have to compare, and you don't have to, try to top that person. You just sit there and you all be together. So, and that for me, again, I'm going to go back to the whole social media thing, even though I'm now forced back onto social media. Thank you, Andreas.
Sorry. Hey, just for now. Maybe afterwards we can manage it without you.
Yeah, but I'm okay. I'm okay with it now. But it does. There are things that I'm seeing now. The graduation parties. My friends they all have kids. I want to say babies, but they're not babies anymore. But they all have kids. Logan's age, and they're graduating, or they're about to graduate, or they're driving now. And it's difficult for me to see these things, but it doesn't also create resentment toward them. I sit there and celebrate, and I'm not local to most of the kids that are graduating, but I'll send graduation gifts and cards because I've been a part of their lives, both their parents and them.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. So here's an interesting thought. And as you were saying, it just made me think of this. So there's different kinds of trauma too, right? We're not trying to also say that everything's just as hard. Like if someone breaks a nail, that's definitely not the same as, right? It
doesn't all fall under the same umbrella.
But there's different kinds of trauma. So for example, we're talking about specifically in this particular conversation about loss, right? Where it's like you lost a loved one, right? So your friend who lost her husband, or right. But then there's like trauma where it's more like war, for example, right? That's a whole different category of trauma where veterans come back and they've seen death and loss, but there's also been just fear of danger and continuous or this idea that I could be killed at any moment type of trauma where it's you don't lose particularly. I mean, you might have, but it's more just the general fear for your life consistently for 2 or 3 years, right? Where you're like, now I'm like, every time I hear a pots and pans clang, it's like triggering or
fireworks.
Something. Yeah, fireworks, right? That's like a whole different. So all of these different. There's like the trauma that my wife and I went through with Rio, where it's like we didn't lose a child, but there was this like whole scariness of we have a baby in the NICU. She has to have major surgery, major repairs. Now we have to move on with whatever should have been moments that are going to happen to her in her life going forward because of that and the aftermath of that. So there are some things that are traumatic, but they don't necessarily need to be something that is going to be heavy forever, and they will get lighter as you go on. The things that you've been through, they're always going to be just as heavy, and it's never going to be. You just get stronger, so you don't feel the weight, the bearance of your weight in a way. But there's different things,
I would amend that. I mean, for me personally, and I do think that this is possible for people that are willing to do the work. But I would actually say that things continue or have gotten a little bit lighter, and I am optimistic that they will continue to get lighter. It will never negate the fact that I'm living my life without my child and I am missing out on things I should be. I mean, it is my right as his mother to be able to experience these things. I mean, I do very much believe that, but I don't get to because it's not in my control.
Correct.
And I could allow that understanding to either swallow me whole or feel like I should have been in, and by feeling that I should have been in control or that I'm in control or asking the what ifs or had nots and all of those, or I can relinquish that control. I can surrender to it and allow it to be what it is, knowing that there is something so much bigger than just the fact that Logan lost his life. And I can, surrender to that idea and know physically he's not here, but he is here with me always. And if I can go through a Mother's Day and be like, you know what, he's not physically here and that sucks. But damn it, I got 9 years with that kid and he is worth celebrating.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like this bittersweet realization of the loss or what should have been, right? The should have moments, but also knowing that there's still a life to live. I still have 2 other girls who I adore so thoroughly. I'm so proud of them. And Mila, that's the thing too, is Mila wouldn't be here had it not been for what happened with Logan. So I look at all of these things that have happened in the aftermath, being able to run the nonprofit and meeting all of those people and, being able to take those breadcrumbs that have been put in our path along the way and find my place where I'm at here, which is the first time I think in my life I've ever felt like I'm at home and I felt like I am actually thriving and happy versus, running the machine and, living in the corporate world and living paycheck to paycheck and just trying to, get through life. Right. Here I am being verbose again. You can always stop me.
No, I think it's powerful what you're saying because that's okay. So this makes me think of several things and to reflect with this and just the whole point of this is to discuss these kinds of things because these are the things that people don't want to talk about, or maybe they do, but that like nobody's really diving into these publicly like this. So maybe it helps people be part of this conversation. But so there's this makes me think of 2 things. One, it gets lighter. You mentioned getting lighter. It does get lighter, but I think it's because you get stronger, not because the weight isn't as heavy, right? So it's kind of like if you're used to carrying 20 pounds, after years and years of carrying 20 pounds, your forearms get so strong that 20 pounds feel like nothing. But it doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's 20 pounds less. It just means that
that's fair.
Yep. However, there is some aspects of maybe the trauma is more like kind of like going to the gym is hard because like you don't always, maybe because as years go on, it maybe goes in the back of your head and you don't think about it as much. And so it's more like picking the weight up and putting it back down and doing another rep whenever those echo dates or, those should have been moments. And what I mean by that is because, 1 pound is pretty light, but if I told you to just hold 1 pound straight out from your shoulder for 3 hours, all of a sudden 1 pound feels like 100. And if you don't let it go and if you don't put it down and pick it back up, you'll have to pick it back up at some point to keep moving. But like, if you just keep holding it for a day, all of a sudden your shoulder might get injured, right? There's a moment where you have to, some aspect of letting it go, and then life kind of puts it back in your hand and you have to lift it up again. And then now, is it lighter to pick it up again the second, third, fourth, 1,000th time? Sure, because you're getting stronger. But again, it's more of like this ebb and flow of like, I'm able to let it go. And you even get to this point where, and this happens to me sometimes, where specific dates like this for different traumatic events in my life, where you almost forget that it's that day. You ever get that happen to you? And then you feel guilty for not remembering, but it's actually a sign of healing. And so you're like, oh man, like I feel bad and I feel good. Or you look at, like you said, Mila, like that, she wouldn't have existed, probably, if
Logan, she wouldn't have.
So then it's like, oh man, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, is it either? Is it just life? Like it's so hard to process all these things because on the one hand, anybody can agree it's bad when someone loses their son, especially in the way that you lost your son. That's bad. But also it's good that Mila exists because she has her own life and it's beautiful and she's so smart. And from all the things I hear from you, like she's just this great, spark of life. And so then it's like, how do you even quantify? You can't even like qualify it good or bad anymore, right? You've gotten to this point where it's like, hey, this happened. This happened, and it's happened to other mothers, and it's going to continue to happen to other mothers, whether they lose their son in a car crash or because of cancer or because of whatever, any reason that people, have kids who die. And it's so, in a way it's sad, but in a way it's like, it's like when a person who's at war, who's a father, dies, but their son is born, back home. And it's like, would you even call that good? Bad? Like, what do you even call that? It's so
bittersweet.
It's just, and even bittersweet still doesn't quite, it's like, oh my gosh, that's but honestly, that's fucking life, man.
That's what I was going to say. Well, I was going to say there are many times I use the word mind fuck. It's a total and complete mind fuck for me because
it's so tough.
I mean, when I have to think about I couldn't have this or be where I am today had that not happened. That can be a struggle for me. Not so much anymore because I've I've completely surrendered. I mean, enough to where I've tattooed it on my sleeve. I've got the word, and then I've got let go on the other arm because I have to remind myself of all this, right? But I do think simply surrendering and letting go when you're ready. I also have to point that out because there's going to come a point where you decide or that you're ready. And it's not an overnight thing, right? It definitely wasn't for me because I wasn't ready to let go until last spring. So it's only been about a year that, and that was only through an immense amount of work and, specific programming that I had chosen to do. I say chosen. Jordan had to drag me out of bed every morning for like the first 2 months of that program, because I was like, nope, I hate you. I'm not going today. And he's like, you're going. And I'd get up and I'd go every day, every single day. Side note, it was an OCD program that, after being in residential trauma for the second time, they recognized my OCD and how it was keeping me stuck in, suicidal ideation and in a lack of forgiveness and a lack of moving forward. I mean, to the point where they were telling me that when I was at Milestones for the second time while I was in residency there, they were like, well, you've addressed all of this stuff before and, we're seeing it in these OCD like patterns. And I was like, I hate you all. This team that I adore and I love, and I still work with some of them and I'm in contact with most of them and that I trust wholeheartedly, but they told me that and I was like, I hate you all. You're wrong. You're wrong. But it led to, I allowed that situation. I allowed their suggestion for me to leave residential trauma and to go into an OCD outpatient program. That was a full-time job for 3 months.
Yeah.
I allowed that to happen and I allowed Jordan to get me out of bed and I allowed myself, I don't know how, to drive, 15 miles into Nashville that took an hour every morning because Nashville traffic sucks. And, I did it day after day and I cussed every day going in and it was hard, but I did it. And, after that, that's where things started to open up for me. So when I say that I'm sitting here now and I can handle Mother's Day better than I've ever handled it. And I believe that I'll be able to handle other, missed events, should have been events, right? That I should be having. I think I'll handle them better, but it's because I have surrendered and kind of let just things unfold the way that they were supposed to.
Yeah.
I know I kind of got off track, but I do think that it's very important though. Yeah. To tell people that, I'm sitting here and I'm talking about all of this and it's not like I just magically one day, poof, I was better.
Yeah.
This podcast is going to talk about all the things that I've been through in the past 10 plus years, and that doesn't even start to talk about what happened right before Logan died, the trauma that our family went through. And Jordan and I uncovering our severe childhood traumas that we had no idea until we started, unpeeling all of these layers. And, so it's not been easy. It's been very, very difficult, but I think at the end of the day, my biggest message to people is that there can be another side where it feels lighter, where you still walk with it, but it feels lighter, but it also requires proactivity and work.
Yeah. And with that, I like that this is where you led with as far like the thought of like life is just life and good and bad it's hard. It reminds me of that story. You must have heard of this where the farmer and his son, they take care of horses and it's like an old Chinese fable or something. I'm going to butcher this, but something along the lines of like, one day the fence breaks, there's like a storm and the fence break and their horses escape. And so then there goes their business and the son's like, oh, this is really bad or whatever. And then the dad's like, good, bad, who's to say? And then it turns out that the horses went out and they like gathered a bunch of other wild horses and they brought back a ton of them. And so it's like, oh, this is good. And the dad's like, good, bad, who's to say? And then the kid is like helping clean up on the horses and it like stomps on his leg and breaks his leg. And he goes, I broke my leg. I can't work on the farm anymore. This is bad. And the dad's like, good, bad, who's to say? We'll figure it out. But then the country goes to war and they come and draft a kid, but they're like, I can't be drafted, my leg's broken, and so he doesn't go to war. And it's like, this is good. And, so like the point is, like, things happen in your life that are traumatic. There's no traumatic
or hard,
real, right?
Or
hard,
just,
difficult,
hard.
challenging is real. That is real. Or you find yourself whether because of your choices, right, or someone else's choices, but regardless, you get laid out by the consequences one way or the other, because that is life, right? In your case, you are suffering the consequences of somebody else's stupid choice to drive distracted and be an idiot and kill your son. Like that it was not your fault, but it is now your problem, right? That's fucking life, right?
Yep.
And so, but now you've arrived at a place, and people listening, if you're in the middle of someone else's problem or your own problem, and you're like, there's no way. There's no way. There is a way. There is a way, and you will find. And again, that path is going to look in a lot of ways similar to Brooke's, in a lot of ways different to Brooke's. But the true message that we're trying to get across here is there is going to be moments, those should have been moments, that are going to drag you back regardless of where you are in this journey, particularly probably more closer to the beginning of them, but they will continue to happen. These echo dates that I like the name of, where it's a solid reminder of what should have been, and then you have to learn to just deal with them and carry them, because they're gonna hit you, and just you got to know that they're coming. So,
but do you have to deal and carry with them, or can you see? This is where I go back to the walk alongside
this is true.
them.
Yeah.
Because if I look at my future and I'm like, well, fuck, he turns 18 June 2nd, and I have to deal with the fact that he is gone, and I don't get to celebrate my son's 18th birthday with him as I should, then that sets me up for going into that day automatically triggered and pissed off and not wanting to get out of bed. But if I also choose to look at it, or if I decide to turn that and I choose to look at it as, this sucks. It does suck. But you know what? He was here. He lived here on earth. I can remember birthdays. Let's talk about the last birthday I spent with him, where I took him to Hollywood Studios when we lived in Florida. And it was just him and it was me. And that was one of the best gifts I received before he passed away. And it was his birthday. It was just the two of us. If I can shift that lens for myself and say, recognize that, yes, he is not here, and sit with and honor the grief and the loss, but also say, I'm not going to just deal with it, and I'm not going to let this day be crappy. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to, I think I've mentioned this before, but we're headed to New York City. Yeah. And because that is the last place that Jordan and I went with Logan. That was his last big trip. And so that's where we're headed. And we will be in New York City for Logan's 18th birthday, and Mallory's super stoked to go see the places that he was at, that we took him to see. And so will it be a heavy day? For sure. Are we going to be sitting in some sadness and, grief? Of course we will, but we're also going to choose. And that's what we've done all along. We started right after he passed away, honoring his love of donuts, right, for his birthday. So he would, we got him that day on his 9th birthday before him and I ended up driving on a sugar coma, out to Disney. But we went really early. Him and I went really early in the morning, and we got donuts. And, we have donuts for his birthday and for his, I'm still going to use it, his angel date on September 15th every single year. Typically, we'll also get pizza, because pizza was his thing.
He loved it from
he loved pizza. But also another way to honor all of that, which reminds me of him, but also honors him, is the fact that I started Mort's Minis, which is a mini donut bakery right? And I started it for dogs because of Dash, who, rescued us, right? Basically, after we rescued him, but I always say who rescued
He
who.
saved you. Yeah.
But I started that for dogs, but now it's morphed into people are ordering them for themselves because it's so clean and healthy. But but that's the whole idea of everything, right? Is doing something that is good, right? But in turn is honoring
Yeah.
Logan. And so that's kind of like that path you kind of you can end up walking, is the bittersweetness of it. I'm just going to use the word.
Yeah.
It's bittersweet, but
It's like
I choose not to dread, and that's
yeah.
a choice that I had to learn to make, because that again is relatively new in the past year for me.
Yeah. That's as we might be doing this podcast for years, but it'll be more and more healthier. It's healthier ways of carrying the load, I think is what I'm arriving at here.
Yeah.
That I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, it can be. But again, it takes initiative. It takes personal initiative to allow yourself. I get up and there are my doggies. My doggies are saying hello. Dashall. Speaking of the dogs, see, they knew. I said the word donut and they knew. They just knew.
They're this is going to be for us.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I do. That's how I get them inside. If I want them inside, I'm like, guys, donut. Hey, see, donut. Shh. And silence. But
that's interesting. That's so hard to. It's hard to think about to get to that point, because there's certain. It's to get to a point where, how do I say this? Like for me, when you get to a point, I look back on some of the more traumatic moments in my life, and as I've learned to heal and grow through them and carry them, I almost get excited nowadays for some of those days. I get excited for the suck of it. You know what I'm saying? Like I embrace.
Is it a challenge for you?
It's almost a challenge for me. And again, this is actually also interesting because everybody deals with this so differently.
Right.
So it's like, somebody might tell me I'm doing it wrong. And if doing it wrong is this way, then I guess I'm doing it wrong. But it works for me.
Nobody has the right to tell anybody that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, but like for me, I'm almost like, all right, this day's gonna suck. I start looking forward to not forward to being sad. That's saying it wrong. But I start looking forward to seeing how. Here's something I heard this weekend when I was in Austin that I think puts it into words. And I think it was the first time I heard, and it's not the first time I heard this. I've heard this before, but it was the first time I heard it and it registered in a different way. You ever have that happen where
Yes.
you've heard people say something and then all of a sudden you hear one more, the 50th time, you're like, oh, that clicked in a different way. When the student is ready, the teacher of life appears.
Right.
But emotions are just information. Right? They're not good and they're not bad. They're just information. And so if I know, you can mention this leading up to this day, right? Leading up for you to June 2nd, for me, July 13th, right? When we start getting there, there's this like, anticipation, and I know that the sadness is coming. And so what I do instead is I'm excited to see what information the sadness brings. Like I already know it's a foregone conclusion. Of course I'm going to feel sad. I'm also going to feel happy, right? I'm also going to feel sad, but it's a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen. So now the way I think about it is, okay, how can I get excited about whatever it's kind of like when you turn on a movie that makes you cry.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're like, I know this is going to make me cry. I don't know why I'm putting it on again. I could watch, something funny, but I want to watch this because I want to feel it. So you start kind of looking forward to that grief in a little bit. And so to me, that's how I see it. It's more like, okay, this is going to make me feel sad.
Allowing yourself to feel it also prevents all of that from being stored in your body.
Yeah.
And all of that being stored in your body leads to hitting a wall later, or leads to chronic pain, or, and that's the thing too, is we're not taught to feel our emotions. We're taught to stuff it.
Yes.
That was one of the primary lessons I was taught growing up. Just, put your head down and just keep moving forward. Oh, you want to cry? That's not okay. You want to emote? You want to have feelings? That's not okay. And, I got that from one parent, and the other parent, you know, just never emoted or spoke about things that were hurtful, or, it's like taking on that super, I mean, it's my mom, so I don't know why I'm dancing around that, but she was taking on like the superwoman role of keeping us protected and keeping everything okay for us, but in turn taught me to shove everything down. So I've got, this father who is a bully, ultimately, who's teaching me to be afraid. And then I've got this mom who I'm watching be strong, right? But I never get to see her have emotions. I never saw my mom be emotional. I just saw her as this woman who could do anything.
Yeah.
So I became this woman who could do everything, not learning how to emote or embrace it.
Because that's mistaken for toughness. It's mistaken for like, oh, you don't cry? Oh, you're so tough.
Right. So, I mean, I have over here on my dad's going, it's not okay to cry. My dad has passed, and I hope he's learned what he needs to learn where he's at now. But, he was a bully, and he was codependent, and he needed to be taken care of. So I became his caretaker, and all in that process, I was learned, build a hard shell, don't cry, and so I brought all of that, what I learned from both of them, into this grieving process where I had to show the world I was resilient.
Yeah.
I was okay. But what people don't know, very few know, is what I actually been through. The 2 residential trauma stays, the OCD program, the suicidal ideation and attempts, and all of this stuff that was manifesting because I wasn't allowing myself to feel any of it. And Jordan was telling me for all of these years, you got to feel it, Brooke, you got to face it. And I'm like, fuck, I'm a retired graphic design professor who was tenured and rebuilt the graphic design program at this school and made it into something, and I don't need to be weak.
Look at my resume.
That's
right.
Tough, it's actually, for me, it was a CV because I was in higher education, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But that's exactly
what you feel
it.
Like. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and you'll hear me at some point. If I haven't said it already, but I'll say it numerous times. I walked away from that viewing myself as I was a dedicated, motivated young woman who started a graduate program at 27 that was a guaranteed 3 years at Iowa State, where most MFAs or most master's programs are 2 years. This program was so amazing that it was 3 years. So technically, I did PhD work and only walked away with an MFA, go figure. But Logan was, 8 weeks old when we moved. And so, here I am, Superwoman, right? I was taught to be, I watched my mom be Superwoman, which is great for her that she taught me that. But I also didn't teach, or wasn't taught, that it's okay to be human. So I'm walking around, and then I go into my job, and, I'm the Superwoman, and I'm trying to do all this stuff for these students and for the program and all of this. And, and then Logan dies, and I start to get feedback from the world people still today tell me, you're so strong. And I'm like, I need to stop you right there. I'm not strong. I have worked to become resilient. But I carried that, what I learned from my parents, until about 2022. And once I started, my own residential trauma at Milestones, that's when I started to unravel where all of this had come from, and started to really re-examine the guilt that I had, or the what ifs, or, really leaning into trying to connect to my emotions and feel, versus just put up a wall and push through it like my dad had always taught me to do.
Oh.
So, and that's the thing. We got to feel it. We got to feel it. If you want to get through it, you've got to feel it. We don't numb it. We feel it. We don't hide from it. We feel it. I know.
That's so counterintuitive. I'll close. I'll do my closing thoughts with this, and then I want to hear some closing thoughts on this topic, and then we can wrap this one up. But the sales training that I went to do the recording for in Austin with my client, she's an emotional intelligence coach, which, by the way, she'd be, I think, a good guest in some of this. Her name is Jules Wilhelm. She's great, but she was teaching this group of like executives or like higher up people in this like nationwide company. Doesn't matter. My point is, these were like leaders, right? These were leaders in their field, blah, blah, blah. And part of her training she did was like, at some point she had them like stand up in the room and go, stand closer to that wall if this is yes for me, if like this applies to you, and over here if no, not so much, right? So whatever. And then she started asking questions about feelings, because it's emotional intelligence training. And she started with, I'm pretty in tune with my own emotions. And so people would like spread themselves throughout the room based on how much they agreed or disagreed with that, right? Left or right. And then at one point, she kept, and these are all leaders, like, yeah, I'm good. I'm a leader. I can attune my emotions. And then sometimes, how good are you at attuning at other people's emotions? Like how do you pick up how other people are feeling? Okay. So they kind of shuffle around. But then she asked, in my household growing up, there was a lot of anger at display, or there was a lot of anger growing up in my household. Somebody yelled, whether parents, whatever, and the murmurs and like shift in people's behavior when they had to like, the mirror kind of got turned onto them, and how many people went to yes, me. I mean, obviously there's people still spread out, but like the bulk of the group moved. And in my head, I'm like, you know what? I bet you this is pretty common for a lot of people whose parents were in that generation of like the 80s and 90s of like emotions are like sadness, toughen up, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, don't be weak, crying is or wusses, or whatever. And the next question after that was something along the lines of like, emotions were okay in my household. Like we talked about our feelings, and more people moved to the not my house kind of. And I'm looking at this going, oh my God. And these are people who are like leaders in a major corporation. I mean, like, this is probably the case for everybody. I mean, I guarantee if you just picked out 100 random people of this age group, between the ages of like maybe 25 to 45, 50, most of them have had this experience growing up. It is now a very new thing to have people share, and like that emotions are important and that feelings matter. And all these people who think they're so tough, and even listening to this might be like, emotions are for whatever. It's like, dude, you have no idea how much weaker you sound by saying something that ignorant, because again, emotions are just information, and the reality of the situation is, if you don't want to deal with them, it's either out of pride or fear, which means you're either an egomaniac or you're a freaking coward, because you're not willing to face the music and deal with the shit that you grew up with.
Those
it's hard.
Emotions. I mean,
and
listen,
it's hard.
When I
but
go,
that's why it's scary.
Yeah, I go to, I do regular EMDR sessions with, this wonderful woman. I love her. Her name's Tara. I worked with her at Milestones, but I get activated every single time I drive to her. I mean, it's a half-hour drive for me, and I'm the entire time going, and I'm trying to tell myself, suck. Well, I mean, and it does, but you know what? Every time I walk out of it with a new understanding of something and new aha moments. So it's embracing, right? It's embracing that feeling or those emotions that allow you to take that next step. But what's also interesting to me is that, and I bring this up because of something that you had said, but when I truly embraced and allowed my emotions to be in my life, AKA about a year ago, that's when my real healing began, and I was able to start opening myself up. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm telling you,
that's
I
8 years after you've been fighting them. It took you 8 years to get to that point. Wow.
Well, and yesterday, on Mother's Day, there was a time where it actually rained yesterday afternoon, which forced me to come in, and I'm sitting in the chair while Mila's watching Oopsie Kitty. I mean, I could have a whole episode on some of these kids shows. My God. But, and Blippi, if you haven't seen Blippi, let me tell you. But I was sitting in the chair, and for a minute I felt guilty because I was sitting there not doing anything. And I recognized that doing something was my way of distracting myself from my feelings.
Yeah.
So I continued to sit there, and I gave myself time to sit there, and I did. And then when it stopped raining, I said, okay, I've given myself time. I recognize this. I know I feel my anxiety. And now I'm going to go back outside, and I did. So I allowed myself to sit in all of that for a while instead of coming inside, finding something to do because I felt guilty that I wasn't doing something to distract myself, but again, it's only been about a year that I had done enough things had started to click enough for me to understand that. And of course, the work that I've done, I've been, one of my therapists has taught me how to just kind of sit with the anxiety and, okay, hello, anxiety, here you are. I don't need to fight you. I don't need to try and stop you. I just need to recognize that you're there, and it's uncomfortable as hell.
Oh yeah. It sucks.
But I can also recognize what's going on and not push it away anymore. I don't distract from it or just push it down inside. And that allows me to little by little, and I'm telling you, little by little, do better at facing things that I know are going to be hard. Yeah. But each time I face them, that anxiety, and I get through them and everything's okay, that anxiety eases up. Like starting this podcast, I was dysregulated all day for the first day after the very first recording. I was dysregulated. I could not get my body.
You messaged me about that.
Yeah, it was bad. But the more I've done it, the more I've allowed myself to recognize, like this morning, I was anxious going into this one because I knew what we were probably going to talk about, or, what I was going to end up talking about. And, I sat with it. I even went and saw my allergist, and I came back and I was sitting with it, and, I'm relaxed now. I've talked about all this. I'm relaxed, and I don't anticipate walking out of here feeling like I'm lost, but that's because I've continued to address it and face it. And I think with each time that I do, that response eases up because my body starts to understand I am safe. Nothing bad is going to happen.
It's not that you're strong. You are strong when people tell you that, but that's not the accuracy. The accuracy is you're courageous. And this is, because
I like that word better.
Because you are willing to face the challenge, the shittiness of that discomfort. And that's something that people who want to heal maybe are having trouble doing is, hey, it is scary as shit. Right? And it might kill you, honestly. Like in some cases, it could be something that, or it might feel like it's going to kill you.
That I would reference that. Yeah, I would reference that.
But you are so strong, right? And you are so brave. And because you are brave, that's why you need to go talk about this with somebody, go face the difficulty. You have to learn, how do you get through these, to wrap this up, how do you get to these should have moments and carry them and survive them, depending on where you're at in your journey, is you have to use the courage that you have to embrace them. Almost, you almost have to be like, all right, this is coming. I know it's coming, and here's what I'm going to do. And this is why I can do it. It's because I'm courageous, and it's because I can do this,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so easy to say.
Anyone can, but you know what? It's also a choice. I mean, everybody has their own choice in life, and you can not, do that kind of work for yourself and continue to live with it. And that is perfectly okay if that's what you decide you want to do. Or you could choose to hold your breath and dive and just let be what's going to be. But the thing of it is too, is that anybody who's scared of doing that, I'm here and you're here to be a support system, to catch them when they fall, to say, I hear you. It's awful. And look what else is, can potentially happen. Look at the potential you have to gain in life, to getting that life
because
back.
Because sometimes if you don't make that choice, it'll be made for you, and that sucks
that
sometimes. Or so,
Yep.
which could lead us to a whole different episode. So,
yeah, there are a lot of episodes in this one, huh? Addition.
On that note, we'll put a bow on this one for now. Again, this would be something that is going to be referenced to back later on. We're still covering some of those topics from ahead of time. We do have probably another Q&A episode coming up here soon, but the next one we're recording, if you guys, we're going to be dropping these in order now. So then the next one we record, we're going to have a guest. It'll be our first guest besides us two. And so look forward to that. Do you want to give like a hint or a quick teaser of what it'll be, or do you just want to leave it a mystery?
Let's leave it a mystery.
I like that. All right, everyone. My name is Andres Gamboa. We have been on with Brooke Scherer, and this is the Trauma Uncensored podcast, where we are healing out loud. And I love that. I love that tagline. All right. See you guys on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.